Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this screening of The Sound of Identity. My name is Ash Hoyle. I'll be moderating this post-film Q&A discussion, for which I am so excited to be joined by director and editor, James Kicklighter, and participant, Lucia Lucas. Welcome to you both. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's really thrilling. Just start by telling me a little bit about how this project came to be. James and Lucia, how did you get connected and where did this all start?
Well, I was approached by producers Russ Kirkpatrick and Andy Kinslow about this event that Lucia was going to be doing at the Tulsa Opera. And they asked me if I would be interested in making a film about it. And I, knowing nothing about opera, at first told them that I wasn't sure what we should do. But then once I started talking to Lucia and trying to get a better sense of what she was about, what opera was about, and why this performance was obviously going to be important, it was something that I knew I needed to tell this story. This was something that was, I thought, important and really culturally relevant to the conversations that we're having right now in culture around the transgender community.
And Lucia, what it was like for you? I know obviously you're a trained performer, but this is a whole different flavor on screen. How was that? What's the difference to you in the performances on screen and on stage?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's sort of two mediums at once. I mean, not that there's really acting for a documentary, but you definitely can't erase the cameras from your brain. So, I'm trying to prepare an opera role. It was a role debut too. So there was a whole lot of things coming together at once, which sort of made it complicated. But yeah, I hope that I gave a pretty good idea of what I do in preparation. I hope it was fairly genuine in that respect.
Absolutely. I think one of the strengths of the film is just such an eye-opening sort of encounter, for many maybe first encounter with opera, with its history, with what goes into preparing a show. And on that note, I'd like to know from both of you, did you think that this particular performance, Don Giovanni, was sort of apt for this kind of historic performance? You addressed it somewhat in the film, but did it resonate as kind of the right thing for the right time?
Well, at least for me, being, as I said, I didn't know much about opera walking into it. It was something that was very helpful to have, experienced veterans like Lucia and Tobias Picker and Denny Sayers, who really know this world up and down. They were able to give me that course as I'm filming, obviously. And so for me, I thought that taking a classic piece of work like Don Giovanni, which some consider to be the granddaddy of all operas, right? It's this thing that's been around for a long time that talks about issues that are relevant today. I thought that interpreting that in a modern context with Lucia's performance was a really interesting way to not just explore the world of opera and introduce it to audiences that I also felt would probably be their first experience with opera, like it was me as a director, but also through the context in which they were interpreting it and the context in which Lucia was interpreting it. I thought that using that as a motif throughout the film was really important to both explore opera and also the performance.
Anything to add, Lucia? I imagine
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, no, I mean that's it. The most important thing is, and the really cool thing that James brings to it is sort of a fresh take at opera. Like, what is this about? Like an inquisitive take. What is this about? What goes into it? For me, I think it was an interesting moment to catch for me, because it was such an important moment. It's like I've been working in Europe for a decade. I trained in the US, but then I came here, and then coming back, it was a very important moment. If I had my choice, I'm not sure that I would have picked that moment because of how much stress was involved in it actually. But I think that it was really cool that we eventually did get to capture that moment. Because if I wouldn't have done a good job on the performance in the end, because of all of that, I probably would have been sad about the experience. But I'm very happy that that happened. And who knows, maybe that extra energy, that extra adrenaline really made that performance pop in the end anyway. So, you know, I can't say that the documentary didn't have any sort of extra influence on that.
And I have to say, you know, for me, that was terrifying too, obviously, because I, knowing little about opera walking into it, I wanted to make sure that we did it justice. But not just that, obviously, I knew how important this performance was for Lucia. You know, it wasn't just me coming in and capturing a performance. It was one that was getting international attention. It was one that was important for Lucia's career. And as a documentarian, you know, your job is to, you know, not puppet master. You're there to observe and kind of follow the story as it goes. And so it was really important to me to do our best to film what we were filming, but not get in the way of the real performance of the real events that were happening, because it's not me just making a movie, it's me making a movie about a real show that's going to occur. And so you really have to balance what it is you're trying to film with the respect that Lucia has a performance to give, Tobias has a show to put on, you know, Denny has a show to put on, you know, you're part of their process. And so you want to do that without trying to get in the way of it, you know?
Absolutely. And you were balancing so much else as well, Lucia, the press and this larger story, these larger questions that you were a part of. Can you speak to what it was like to share that layer as part of the film, and James, sort of how you included that strain about what it was like for you to sort of wear this kind of advocacy and as well as being a preparing performer? And in a documentary, of course, that's a layer that's not quite in the text.
Yeah, it's quite a layered layered event. Yeah, it was the first time that I had seen my dad in 10 years. I mean, there's that, you know, that's just another thing that is completely separate, but totally affects focus, you know, just that alone, the first time performing in the US as a professional and not just as a student anymore. The thing about advocacy and the thing about being open is when I decided, yes, I am going to come out, it was kind of like, well, I can't be a stealth female baritone. There's not too many female baritones out there. You know, not that there aren't any, but it's just and in the opera world, there was no sort of, there was nobody to look to see how does it work, how did it happen. So for me, I've just tried to be as open as possible in the hopes that maybe it would help somebody in the future. But of course, you know, giving a bunch of interviews is very different than a month of being followed by a camera. So I guess it was just sort of taking my idea of being open and as honest as I possibly can be about everything, and just living that for a month along with, you know, putting together an opera.
Yeah.
So
and in something like this, you're only as successful as, you know, your access. And so for a film like this, we're very fortunate that Lucia and Tobias and everyone else in the film permitted us access to see their process and really take you through it. Because for me, from a directorial standpoint, Lucia's advocacy was extremely important here, especially in the context of where we're filming. But it's not just about advocacy either. I thought that the most important thing, for me at least, as a director, was the process. I wanted people to see Lucia as a performer. I thought that was extremely important, that you saw how hard she works, how hard everyone on the performance works to put together something that you're going to do over 2 days, which is so much work for 2 days of performance. I thought it was important to take you through that process whilst doing the advocacy, whilst doing the press, because that is the part of performance, not just in opera, by the way, but in film or music or any other creative medium, that the general public just doesn't get to see. You see a final product, whatever it is, be it a film or an opera performance or an album that you listen to, but you don't see all of that work that goes into it. And so I thought it was important that we saw Lucia's talent, not just her advocacy, not just what she's getting press for. You needed to see her as a talented performer, which obviously she is, as she just debuted at the Met. And so those are things that you get to see in the film, how she's able to get from point A to point B. And then I think for someone that may have differing views about the transgender community, you start to see Lucia as a person, not an idea, and that's extremely important.
Absolutely. And the layered approach is so appreciated. That's what we do as trans people. We have to wear all these different hats and all these different layers in every space. And you handled it so elegantly and you portrayed it so beautifully. I think it added a lot to the depth of the film for sure. I want to ask you too. Yeah,
I just
please.
wanted to say, like, in addition to that, and thank you, James, for portraying me as a performer, because, you know, I do as many interviews and I you know, I try and be as open as I can, but the job, no matter how many interviews I do, it doesn't necessarily make up for talent. Like, I'm constantly having to prove myself, and maybe even a little bit more, just to say, no, this isn't about, you know, interviews that I've done. It's not even about a documentary that happened. Like, I'm glad that the documentary happened, but I have to show that I still have the talent consistently all the time. And it was a big risk, you know, to show what's going on behind the curtain, you know. And there were multiple opera houses, like big opera houses in the States, that came and visited. And yeah, and you know, if it went well, it went really well. But if it didn't, you know, who knows? Things disappear. And so but I think in the end, it ended up showing what I do, how seriously I take this. So I'm very thankful for that too, James.
Absolutely. Yeah, it absolutely came through. And I'm wondering also about how you sort of framed this from a technical perspective, James. The framing, the composition, it's so handsome. I wonder if maybe you drew on operatic design in any way for how you sort of built your visual language.
I'm so glad you noticed that. Yeah, my director of photography and I have worked together for a very long time. And in our initial conversations, as I expressed, I did not have a relationship with opera growing up. I grew up in a town of 123 people in South Georgia. We did not have an opera house. And so my experience with opera was what I had learned in music classes and stuff growing up. And so Jonathan Pope and I, the cinematographer, in our initial conversations said, well, if we're going to do a film about opera, which is a heightened world, about a heightened art form that is in some ways dying and in some ways being reinvented, we need to give it a theatrical context. We don't want to treat this like we would treat a regular documentary that is, you know, about history or something. It's about a live event that's happening now, and it needs to have a theatrical context. And so we really did treat it like we would a narrative feature film that's scripted, where every shot was composed, every image was, you know, framed. We really did not attempt to make it gritty because we thought that would be the wrong approach for something like this. We wanted to really emulate the art form of opera, and that's what we attempted to do.
I'd say successfully, for sure. It's certainly evident to me. We're coming up to time, but I'm curious from both of you, you know, Lucia, in the film, you spoke about how each opera has an emotional core that really drives its longevity and its relevance. What would you both say is the emotional core of your film, or what do you hope it to be?
I mean, I just hope that I came across as honest and a hardworking performer, but I'm not going to say the film, because I didn't film it, I didn't edit it. I'm just thankful for it.
I think for me, the answer is the emotional core is what a performer brings to a performance. Because to me, you're talking about the different layers that we just expressed within this film. We have the layer of the event, we have the layer of the history, we have the layer of Lucia, and all three of those are intertwined. None of them are separate from the other. And so to my mind, while I was editing and directing this, and Lucia is talking about emotional core, Well, to my mind, at least, and I don't know if Lucia feels this way, but as for me, it's about her dad. You know, the core is her dad and her reunion with her dad at the end and what that means for her performance. And so the emotional core is what we as people bring to our art, or to our work. And I don't think that any artist can divorce that from their performance. It's what our experiences are that build us, that make us, good and bad. And that is how we express ourselves through the work that we make. And so to my mind, the emotional core in any performance, including this one, is everything that Lucia brings to the table in her life and how she expresses that through her work. That to me is the core of the film.
Beautifully said. And yeah, I love in the last bit, you know, you're building to this performance, obviously, but then you really let Lucia's voice and your reflection, your emotions sort of drive us home. And then that feels like the right way to end things. So well done to you both. Thank you so much for being here, and good luck with the rest of the life of the film.
Thank you so much.